So
Yes, Anand.
wait, hold on. I got a couple of notifications. Acha, so you started off the recording and the transcription, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. Uh, so should I just wanted to ask one thing, like, matlab, if folks do want to get into like the specifics of like how their initial week might be, I don't know whether this kind of a question would come up or not. So, is it fine for me to like share like the task and the goal which I had set up for a previous mentee, like from the previous platform itself? Is
Mhm.
it okay for me to share that with them?
Right, right. You can share that. Just remember that the code is to inform them that how you can help people
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So I have to give them my own USP essentially, and
But that
yeah, yeah,
it could be, sort of a free value that they might get, and because of that, they might come back to you for more.
yeah, got it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay. So I think we have people started to join in one by one. Hey, so I think like we'll just go ahead with like just like for folks, I think so. Uh, that might be like a better connection, one-on-one, I suppose. So yeah, so I think we'll just get started. So hey Roy, hey Deepak, hey Ajay, and hi Green Recorder. I don't even know whether it's a plugin or someone. So hey folks, yeah. So myself Aryan, and we'll just like go over a few aspects essentially. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions with the help of which I was thinking that we could essentially take the talk ahead first. So I'm going to launch those two questions up ahead. So on the bottom right tab of your screen, you'll see a pop-up on activities, uh, where you'll be able to check out the section. So on the bottom right tab of your screen, you'll see a section named activities, and you'll check out. So you'll see that a few polls are live, a couple of polls. So could you just check those out? So yeah, I'm seeing like the options starting to fill up on a one-by-one basis. So yeah, since we have like a couple of participants, you can just unmute yourself if that's an option. Because do folks have an option to unmute themselves?
I'm just unmuting from my end.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, good. So since we have like less folks here, though, what we can do is that we can take it in a much more conversational manner rather than like a webinar-esque manner. Yeah. So basically, the sections which I'm seeing is related to the initial scope of the problem statement, the ideating features to insights, and then validating and testing out those features. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll first of all, uh, folks, are you able to unmute yourself, Roy, Deep, and Ajit? Yeah, yes, yes. I think that's all right. So what we can do now is I'll just go over the individual studies themselves. In just in a second, I'll just start sharing them. So yeah, what I was going to take it to folks is how do we scope out these design tasks themselves? So in front of you, I'll take you through two design assignments and tasks where the way in which the solution has been set up isn't quite orthodox per se, but it's better for the recruiters for which you're designing the study. So most of the folks in the poll had checked out that folks only have about 5 to 10 minutes, and each of your portfolio would have about 4 studies, right? So within those 4 studies, you'll have about like the recruiter would have about a minute or so to go through them. And it isn't necessary that the recruiter who is going through them has that domain knowledge which you had while creating that case study. So what ends up happening is that as a designer, when you make that case study, you have made the entire user interface, went through the entire structure of it, and you're quite knowledgeable about it. But the final person who's going to look at your portfolio is a first time reader of it, right? And due to that gap, you have to essentially make sure that the content is digestible. So in that sense, writing down an orthodox process-centric case study where you essentially follow any kind of a process, be it a double diamond process or any other kind of a process, it ends up making a piece of literature which is good for documentation rather than making an engaging case study. And the way you'll have to do that is through storytelling itself. And by storytelling, I don't mean that you have to make a theatrical piece about your entire study itself. It's essentially about bucketing the information in a more digestible manner. So what I'll do is I'll take you through a consumer-based study on No Broker, which was a design assignment shared by them. And then the other one from Nutanix, which is an enterprise firm. So they had a B2B scenario essentially to go about. So could you just give me a second? Yeah. Yeah. So the problem statement in front of you, this one is related to Nobuka, and this was related to a feature which they had launched after the problem statement essentially. So this is them integrating amenities into their pre-existing platform where they can essentially get into a space where they can target gated communities in areas. So all of these gated communities will have a lot of sports equipments and uh, various other kinds of amenities related to swimming pool, badminton gym, which you'll see in the problem statement, right? So the main reasoning behind that was they want to make sure that all of these amenities are being managed properly as well as accessible to the users properly. Now, the solution might be quite simple related to the actual problem itself, but documenting in a study is the solution, which I'll show to you. So I'll switch out my tab. Okay. So have you folks just read through the problem statement in front of you? You can just put up a thumbs up if you have. Then I'll just move on to the solution itself. Yeah. Anybody else left out if they want to go through the problem statement itself? I'll just wait for 1 minute and then I'll switch out. Okay. So yeah, the core problem statement and the scenario is something which they had provided. Now, most of the firms would just stop there, and they won't provide you much more information about after the problem statement. Even providing a design test scenario was something which they had done quite well. Other than that, the objective and the deliverables was something where they had attached the weightage and the tip for the problem statement then and there itself. So this already becomes a green flag for the provider of the problem statement or the firm for which you're applying, essentially, which means that this kind of a problem statement wasn't made through a secondary hiring agency. Essentially, it was made by the designers who are part of the company itself. So this kind of a visibility is a good thing. So if you see like a well-structured problem statement from your end anytime in the future, so that would be easier for you to essentially articulate towards as well. So yeah, you can go through the objective and the deliverables as well. I'll just wait for 1 more minute and then I'll show the solution. Okay. So yeah, now I'll show you the solution. It's directly on my Figma only, I think. Yeah. So this was the final solution for the problem statement which I submitted. So this was for no brokers design task itself. So it was essentially named as on play. So whenever you come up with a problem statement where you want to showcase the actual problem at hand, what you can do is you can essentially showcase your divergent thinking, which is through the process itself. So I think most of folks have some understanding related to the double diamond design process, right? So rather than like writing the process done in there itself and then showcasing it in a templatized manner, what you can do is keep First, show the unstructured manner with which you were scoping the problem statement, showcase the insights you have gathered from the research itself, and then move ahead with the actual solution. So while preparing for the design task, whenever you go ahead with any section, what you can do is come up with these questions through a chain of thought, which will show clarity about what kinds of questions comes to your mind whenever you look at a brief. And this is something which is similar to the actual job at hand, which you'll be doing, where you will be given PRDs, or you may have to scope and come up with a product strategy from your end. So going through with this kind of a visualization may seem messy at first, but it helps you to essentially take out and then essentially go through like the questions itself and provide more clarity to them. And what you can do is rather than making a framework out of this entire thing, what you can do is you can ask larger questions related to sections and then segmentize it. This would help you to make your entire presentation a lot more digestible for the first time reader in front of you. Okay. Now, when I move forward to this slide, where I'm essentially talking about the current scenario, this is related to the background information which they had given for the problem statement. So since they had framed different aspects of the problem statement quite good, I decided to not go ahead with the secondary research, rather than just use the information which they have given as the set of information I have, take up an assumption if I have to take at a place, write it down then and there itself, and then move forward with it. So over here, I had a question. I had seen a question which somebody had dropped on the group session beforehand, which was how can you show the overarching information as well as the nitty-gritty of it. And the question related to the poll, where folks have about 5 minutes to go through a portfolio, that also ties in here. So basically, whenever you try to research and then gather the information, now showing it in a templatized manner through a persona or an empathy map becomes a quite meaningless endpoint. So I'll give an example for it. For example, if you have a UX researcher or you yourself are trying to research all of the information, right? So you went over, you did the secondary research on the internet, you took a survey, you took interviews with folks, right? Now, all of that research and information, the types of insights which you get, you coalesce them to the first degree where you got your insights. And after that, you decided to put it inside a template through a persona or through a empathy map, let's just say for now. Now, the issue is that a lot of designers essentially hand this off as the first set of deliverables to their counterparts, be it product or engineering, to essentially give an understanding of what kind of a user they're dealing with. Now the issue is that you lose nuance of the information if you coalesce it twice, where you first have that set of insights and after that you coalesce it further into a template. So that is something which should be avoided because it gives a leeway of hallucination. Because if you give your counterpart a starting point of a persona card from which they are going to then think of things from their end, then what would end up happening is that there might be some sets of information which have started to hallucinate or begin from then and there itself. That may or may not be a good factor for your final solution, which is up on a case by case basis, but it is generally a bit problematic if everybody on the team is just starting out, essentially. So this is something which is relevant when folks are looking at your case studies as well, that how are you essentially showcasing your final insights. So what you can do is keep it on a two-tier basis, where you first show up. So I would recommend you folks to essentially drop out personas and then pick up archetypes, where you can show either the key user task or the user goal along with the person to create some empathy for the person for which you're solving the problem for, and then show the individual insight which you have gathered. And now you can visualize it as well. So in this case, what you can see is that the top half of the section gives you context regarding the user's background, but then the second half has some kinds of cases with the help of which you can clearly understand what kind of a issue this user might face, through which you can then share the insight. So what this does is it essentially makes a very digestible format in which you can brief your viewer, be it like a first-time designer or a recruiter who's looking through a problem statement about the issue, and then give the uh, detailed explanation then and there itself, right? And the manner in which you do that is dependent on a case-by-case study basis, and it is completely all right to not go on a templatized manner. uh, so that is a major differentiating factor to make sure that your case study isn't yet another uh, templatized piece on Behance, essentially. And this becomes good when you're trying to showcase things to your counterparts as well, basically. So they had provided us three kinds of user scenarios. And for those all three user scenarios, I had essentially come up with different kinds of scenarios in which the user might face issue or are able to solve their problem, essentially. So what this ends up doing is when you're trying to showcase your insights to the person, if they have 5 minutes and you have about 4 case studies, they'll put up about 1.5 minutes about, I believe, for each study, right? So when they go through this section, these kinds of studies, visualizing the key information lets you help them gather more information when they're trying to sift through those studies really quickly. Because once you show them the UI and the solution, the research which you have done and the final solution which you show shouldn't feel disconnected. So essentially, you have to set up that visual hierarchy across your case study. And a lot of times, folks don't do that. So whenever you're trying to showcase any kind of a research output, be it a survey output, right? Rather than showing the exact metric of the survey itself, what you can do is gather the key insight around it, create a user narrative which fits that outcome which you have thought of, and then visualize it, be it on a timeline manner, be it in any sort of manner, essentially. So over there, the complete creative freedom is up to you. But the way you can structure it is this, essentially. So a shorter and a more crisp understanding of the user's background, and then the key issues which they'll be facing, but at a much more depthful level, placed one after another. So that once they sift through the study really quickly, they can understand half of it. And then if they plan to sit through the entire study and then go through it, in case you get shortlisted, so they'll still have some depth to go by, essentially. So I hope you folks are able to understand this aspect about it, which hopefully answers one aspect of your poll, which is about how to essentially go through the initial scope and the research phase of it, and then how do you visualize and showcase the individual section. All right. So over here, the entire context behind the problem statement is highlighted. And rather than showcasing the wireframes and the solution behind it, what you can do is showcase the thinking with the help of which you had made them first, and then show the solution itself. Because again, over here, what ends up happening is that your stakeholder, essentially, or the person who you are showing the designs for the first time, they'll again sift through it really quickly, right? So if you show them some gray sections of a wireframe, they really won't sit there to gain some understanding behind it. So prototyping, so essentially wireframing low fidelity or wireframing mid fidelity or low fidelity, whichever folks you call, or like wireframing in general, that is something which can be done with like a much better set of UI standard beforehand, so that you'll be able to provide much more clarity, right? So what you can do is keep as a designer while making those things in your case study, you can essentially show them the guidelines and the principles which you had used to make them in the first place. Again, this will highlight your thinking behind the entire problem, entire thinking about the problem statement itself. And this becomes really helpful when you're trying to showcase, again, in terms of selection through or shortlisting through those job openings, right? So yeah, once you have went through this section, what you can do is, so this is me essentially thinking about the entire ecosystem and then coming through the process. So this is us coalescing through the insights and the research we have had to think about the features which we'll essentially put up as tasks within the problem statement itself. Okay. Now here, I'll show you. I'll cover the different example. One more example through Nutanix one as well, where you'll see the way in which the features can be scoped down for exactly. And then lastly, we had to think of one more specific aspect, which was about how the actual verification of those amenities will be put up. Because if you think about it, the problem statement has a paradox attached to it, where if we are going to make a digital only application where the person is essentially supposed to check in and check out themselves through the amenities, you're essentially putting people on an honor system where you have to make sure that people, those who aren't using the amenity, haven't actually signed in on it, and the other way around as well, right? So we have to essentially think of those real life scenarios and then again showcase them in a realistic manner, right? Now, again, you'll see that none of these sections which I have made as of now don't none of them actually qualify for any kind of a persona or in any kind of a templatized manner. It is just the scope. It is just me scoping through the problem statement without thinking of a templatized process behind it. Now, this is kind of a user first or like a product oriented thinking to some extent, and this isn't something which you should compartmentalize and leave out. Oh wait, this isn't the part of my problem statement, so I shouldn't work on this. This isn't something which you should think of while working through designs, because you can put up a lot of you have a lot of authority actually, and you should have that nerve to go through these things in a lot more sifted and a lot more granular manner, basically. So yeah. After this, rather than going through the wireframes which I talked about, that the way you shouldn't, I just directly show them the solution first. And the solution which you show isn't in a feature-based manner. You show them the product capabilities, the core product capabilities at hand, and then you directly show them a scenario in which your product will be used. This is really important to showcase the solution, because again, since folks have about 5 minutes to go through your entire study and about 1.5 minutes again, right? So even if they slipped through your entire research thinking that, oh wait, this is just a text wall, this is just everything, a very quick and easy fix in your portfolio could be to just make sure that the final UI screens which you show isn't in a feature-centric manner, rather than in a manner in which it fits the actual user story which you had come up during your research, right? With the help of which you'll be able to show both the screens of the feature itself and the scenarios in which it could be used. So, for example, I had taken the most how should I say this? Like the most problematic user persona, which was persona or like the scenario which the problem statement had provided, and I took that as the section in which I took that as the scenario for which I'll make all of the UI screens for. So yeah, and over there, and then I took folks through all of my screens or through all of my UI designs, essentially by highlighting all of the touch points and then creating a user flow around it. So what would end up happening is that without you even being there to present the solution for you, you have essentially advocated both your clarity of thought as well as the user flow of your final product then and there itself. And this also helps in a different manner where the designer who's actually going through the solution, rather than picking up on the nitty-gritty of your actual UI design itself, they'll see how the product is going through on a screen-by-screen basis. So what they can do is that they can, rather than going on a UI level basis, they can actually go on a flow level basis, with the help of which you will have much more leeway while presenting your counter argument during the interviews as well. So this kind of a scenario walkthrough becomes really good in that. Plus highlighting loading states into your current animation itself, showcasing different kinds of features, features or aspects of your insights which you had used to put up a feature then and there itself, also helps you to bring visibility for your solution. Because again, the research which you had done beforehand, just remember that the person who's looking for it is going through really quickly. So if there is a feature which you had thought of beforehand, which you had written way upwards or way backwards in your piece, what you can do is you can just write it just write it beside where you're introducing that feature as a side note. So the flow, the user scenario through which you're going through becomes the key aspect where their attention might be, and this becomes a secondary piece of information for them, right? And then once you are done with the entire section itself, that is where you can then highlight again some closing of thoughts or some background research which you have done to essentially make this entire section. So if you had come up with wireframes or went through a round of iterations through which you essentially made this final set of scenarios, essentially, that is something which you can show here. So you're essentially taking a top-down approach to show your solution. Now, this is very counterintuitive. And I'm pretty sure in most folks' case studies, this isn't something which has been applied or went through. So yeah. And lastly, you can present a process audit, which becomes really important only in the specific case of design assignments, because for this design assignment, for example, I had about 2 days to make this entire thing from the start of the problem statement to submitting it. So you have to put up what more could you have done given more time, and what were the things which you had left out given the time constraint. These are two very important things which you have to write down, because this gives you again leeway during your interview, talk about why you left out certain things, as well as give more thought, or essentially set up a roadmap if this were an actual feature to go through, essentially. So yeah, this is one problem statement through which this has been applied. And so I have a long-term mentee actually before I came over to Preplaced. I'll take you through his portfolio as well, where we had applied a similar manner, but on a portfolio scale, essentially. After that, we'll come back to the Nutanix case study as well, so that I can show you how this similar aspect can be applied to a B2B scenario, essentially. So this was a consumer-facing product, where the scenario and the user flows are actually quite straightforward compared to enterprise software. So we'll check out that as well. So yeah, right now I'll take you through one of my mentees portfolio, essentially. So yeah, just give me a sec. I'm sharing it. Asha, so as of now, any queries, any questions from your end, folks? Okay, so I'm gonna take that as a no question, I think. But yeah, feel free to like book at least a trial session so that you can take up. So yeah, you can book up a trial session to essentially ping me for some questions you have, essentially, or you can check out the Q&A section which has just been introduced on Preplace itself, where you can ask those questions then and there. That would also help you to. So matlab, I may or may not like go through all of them and then ask or then answer them, or you can then just reach me out directly and then get a trial session as well. So that also works out. So this was so like all four of his case studies were essentially like I helped him to get through that. So this is essentially the problem statement which he had to work upon, making EV chargers more accessible. So this was for EY. EY is an electricity, so essentially like a electric vehicle infrastructure company which has just opened up in India. Those folks are essentially targeting the EV infrastructure rather than actually going up against largely VC funded EV startups in India or larger automobile makers, basically. So these folks aren't putting up the infrastructure themselves; they're essentially digitizing it and putting it up on like an app basis, so that people with range anxiety and a lot of other domain specific problems won't be able to would be able to essentially connect through those chargers, go about compatibility as such. So the key problem statement which Ved was given to work on was to essentially make EV chargers which have been just onboarded onto the platform more accessible, or you can essentially check out their current state more quickly. And they wanted to make that solution crowd driven to some extent. That is something which he scoped during his understanding, basically. So I'll drop over the link in the messages section itself, so that if you folks want to check it out in your own time, then you can do as well. So yeah, what we'll see is the way we had structured. So once all of his work was done, so he had like a first draft. We ended up restructuring all of it into a similar manner, which I showed, where for again in a 1.5-minute context, we first made a TLDR section so that we can showcase what the solution was, the related domain, as well as what was the key problem which he had helped solve. This becomes important because you're able to already set up a lot of context for the person who's going to look at a problem statement. Again, who's a first-time viewer of a problem statement, who may or may not even know the domain behind it, right? And after that, we show the solution then and there itself. So I help them like with the motion with the motion design and such to like understand a lot of these things, and then we use the relevant tools to essentially come up with this. So he had worked on 4 key user flows for this problem statement, and then we ended up highlighting it then and there itself. So what ends up happening is that in the first 30 seconds of their 15 of their 1.5 minutes, you've already given them the core selling point or the core marketing point, the problem behind it, as well as the solution. And after that, you deep dive onto the process. So what this does is it already sets up the expectation and the understanding of what they're doing. And plus, if you're interviewing for a good design company, understanding what's good and bad is like an entire conversation in of itself. So I won't get too deep into it. But again, yeah, book a session with me and then we'll talk about it. So this essentially helps out those designers to immediately grasp the problem. And a lot of product designers, once they're in the industry for like a couple of years at least, what ends up happening is that they are able to understand what kind of a flow your solution should have in general. And once they look at the problem and the solution directly, they can think of they can already think of the kind of steps which will take to reach to this point. So the expectation which you have set up essentially gives more visibility to your solution as well. So even if they're sleeping through your entire case study, they'll at least remember this section, which again helps you with their chances. So yeah, after this, we highlighted his design process, which is again loosely structured in a process-esque manner, which you'll see. So this is mostly set up through the individual sections of the problem statement which he has went through, but we didn't decide to visualize it again in a double design, like a double diamond process essentially, or you have like a lot of other kinds of sections as well, like the idea design process as such. So we decided to not go through with it. And over here, again, the way he has structured all of his problem statements, this is where the aspect of storytelling comes in. Rather than showcasing the process behind what you have done, showcase the insights which you have gathered through them, essentially. So after setting up like the key insights which we had gathered through his secondary research, he showcased them and then showcased it with the correct question which answers that problem for him. What this does is again helps the first time readers. And you'll see that this is something which he had applied throughout the case study. So the first point was related to how we'll, if you remember, which is about how we can showcase a larger level information as well as the underlying background behind it. So what we did in this case was where we had to showcase the current scenario. Do you remember the first slide which I showed you in my case study for in my design test related to how we check out those user scenarios? So in his case, since the journey was quite long, what we did was we essentially storyboarded the entire solution. So what we did was in the primary research section, rather than showcasing that you talk to people and such, what you can do is show the final scenario where you first put up a larger level archetype that there exists this person who essentially wants to go through with this, who essentially has this scenario attached to him. And then you showcase the entire journey which he's currently taking through the story map. Now this through the storyboard essentially. Now this again is loosely set up in a template, but it doesn't following it to the T. And that is something which I wanted to take with you after this section as well. Now, so I think EVA was the first study in which he had to essentially restructure or refactor the entire case study. So this was quite difficult for him, where restructuring the entire thing for a first-time viewer. But this is something which comes with practice. And again, I'll be there to guide you folks if needed. So over here, this is something which I discussed before, and this is how we visualized it. And after that, some of the other insights through the different aspects of the product which he had to look through was something which he highlighted here, and the finalized findings. So you'll see that all of this becomes really texty, really compact with a lot of text. But what ends up happening is that if you set up a visual hierarchy correctly, even if these folks are scrolling through all of this information, what ends up happening is that they'll at least capture a couple of those insights. And since you've already shown your solution up top, a couple of screens, right? So they'll see how those insights are essentially trickling down into your final solution. So that is what you're supposed to target, basically. And when you showcase how you're essentially going through the solutions, so rather than showcasing the flow or like the current kind of a resource which you can put up, what you can do is talk about the different kinds of solution you'll go through, and then you can just put up. So in his scenario, he only had two kinds of options which he had come up after discussing with his team. So I think they had a PM going through with them. So yeah. And after that, what ended up happening was that they had to go through with a solution which will be feasible for a digital-only landscape. Yeah. And after that, they set up a lot of objectives for the problem statement. And after that, they had to examine the idea itself. So you'll see that the entire section, again, isn't set up in a double diamond process. It is just scoping through the process which he had went through and then writing it down as is. This gives you the validity as well as the visibility of the process. And on top of that, it isn't templatized in a manner where they'll see where the interviewer becomes sort of, how should I say this? Those folks become a lot of like a lot less empathetic to what you have done if you put it up in like such a templatized manner essentially. So yeah, I'll focus on one important section which he had worked on. Yeah, the user incentive section. So this was one key section where his thinking was highlighted. which was, if we are going through a crowdsourcing platform, then what kind of an incentive program or a structure should we set up? This is where he had to scope down a lot further into the actual process itself, and he had to showcase what kind of different sections existed as of now through his findings beforehand, and then come up with the final solution. So what ended up happening was that when he highlighted all of the methods through which he had examined the idea, all of those insights were present then and there itself, but the final solution of those insights and the culminating features is written then and there itself. So you provide both the short to read format as well as the large to read format. And you'll see that this is something which I've been saying for like about like 100 times now, I guess. And that is what is the important aspect behind it. And since it's a portfolio piece, you'll have to essentially put up some sections which go ahead with the entire study. Where since you'll see that in a design assignment, you have about a couple of days, so you can't make something. But in this section of a portfolio, you have a lot of time to prepare for this. Right. So we've made this entire portfolio piece in about a week, I believe. Like touch-ups take a time. Touch-ups do take a lot of time, but yeah, other than that, so. And then once you show up the direct final deliverables for your screen, over here, I had recommended him to essentially go through with a with essentially like a scenario through which you can move forward to. But again, due to his internal time constraints, which he had to essentially come up with with like a more feature-oriented way of showcasing the solution. But that still provided enough visibility to his final solutions, because he then decided to animate those different sections, so they became much more engaging. So yeah, whatever I say isn't something which you should apply to 100%, but he, over the span of about 8 months, he gained enough understanding to think about it for himself and for his own portfolio. So that was also something which he matured into, which I like a lot. And lastly, he showed up the user flows to some extent, and he just showed them on a screen by screen basis. So yeah, this is one of the case studies where you'll see some of it in action, going through the kind of a storytelling pattern which I was saying. And this is it applied loosely to a portfolio piece as well. So yeah, the final, wait, hold on. So I think we have one question here. Would a non-template case study of a fresher come off as pretentious, or even making it she doesn't know the fundamentals? That isn't what you should aim for per se. The thing is that look, so he just reached his final year right now, and he isn't even from a design background actually. So the thing is that it isn't about coming off as president. So look, you will already have an understanding of the fundamentals, right? And the way you showcase that isn't by writing it and then making a literature out of it. So the way he had showcased the case study as of now, as you'll see over there, the fundamental understanding of your portfolio will come forward through that thinking itself. That's the thing. And even when you're working in most of the companies, nobody will give you like a check off, like a UX checklist key. Wait, you are supposed to do this kind of research first, then only you can move forward to this. You don't have that creative restriction applied to you in most companies. And for example, I'll just continue off just a second. So other than this, so he had worked with the product folks to help with Ally, which is their product PM product based like peer interview platform. So this was the version 1.0 or 2.0 in which he also helped like making for them essentially. So over here as well, you'll see that the core template sort of is similar across, but the way in which he has again structured his entire study becomes different. So this isn't you coming off as pretentious, it is you making sure that the way you have solved a problem isn't through like a set of um, like pre-learned templates of features or process essentially. It is you going on a problem by problem basis, like on a problem statement by problem statement level basis, and then making sure that you understand the information behind it. So for example, in this case here in the secondary research, he wasn't able to come up with like a direct persona for this for who's going to use the product, as the entire product was getting built right now, right? Meanwhile, in that case study, only a singular feature was getting added to a product. So over here, he just made through the overlying features of the aspect, or like the architect or the archetype of the user he's covering, but he didn't make like a complete persona then and there itself. which is something which he did for the previous study. This is on a case by case basis. So don't think of it in terms of how you'll make the recruiter feel. The recruiter is there for the core thinking which you have done to solve the product. That is the most important thing which you're supposed to showcase to him. It isn't the process, it is your own core thinking. Now the process and the templates help you to do so. But the thing is that in the sea of templatized case studies, that comes off as really like matlab, so whenever you get like a hallucinated answer from chat gpt, right, so that is something which they'll feel that it comes out. It doesn't come out as genuine. So in order to come out as genuine, now you have to essentially showcase the solution in like a direct manner in which you had actually scoped it out. So yeah, I hope I answered the question. If you have a follow-up question, then do like put it up with then in the SL. And again, you can book up a trial session whenever you want. Feel free to book them. I'll answer your questions then and there. So this is also one more study where you can go through, where a lot of like secondary and primary research was done to come up with the platform. And you'll see that even till now, he hasn't come up with a person. And that is because again, the kind of a platform which he's making is a first time user platform. So you can't come up with really strong user archetypes. You'll have to make up a generalized persona so that you can come up with like a very huge list of tasks and user flows which you have to put up in your product. So yeah, do check out his portfolio. I've sent it out. And okay, so before we do cover the final Nutanix case study, what I'll do is I'll take you through one more section. Just give me a second. So after essentially onboarding myself into pre-placed, what has happened is that so if you do end up coming through and if you do end up coming through and then setting up journeys, so this is one of my long-term mentee right now. So I do set up like individual sets of goals where I'll give out the sets of resources, and the core thinking which I want to give you folks out right now is whatever I'm saying isn't something which you are supposed to take in as what's correct or incorrect. I want you to develop your own understanding of what's correct and incorrect, and that is what your design, quote unquote, design taste is about. Whenever you see folks, right, oh wait, he has a really good design taste. So that is a very subjective and a loose term, but what it essentially means is how you're able to separate what's good and what's bad. And again, that's in air quotes. So I don't want to hammer down my own definition of what's good and bad. I want you to develop it yourself. So the kind of a mentorship. So this will just take a couple of minutes and then we'll go there. I'm sorry to bother folks about this. So what we'll do is we'll give you like a set of resources. Some of them may be some sets of information which you have to understand as fundamentals. But other than that, what you'll see is, I think it's maybe in resources too. Yeah. So I share out a bunch of portfolios which you can go through. And these folks are already working in a lot of product-based companies, be it Microsoft, Nutanix, Google, DevRel, Oracle, and where else? Z Entertainment and all. So yeah. What you can do is you can check out their portfolio and you can check out the company which they have went through. And what it would end up doing is that you'll be able to essentially make out those patterns yourself, like the kind of critiquing which I'm doing. You'll start to do that yourself and you'll start to have that thinking yourself, which is where I'll be able to help you hone that thinking to get your own design taste, right? Because if you try to go to a boot camp or such, right, what the issue is that they'll have their own set of tastes and then they'll essentially hammer that into you that this is what's good, this is what's bad. And that is a really reductive way to teach what design is, because design isn't something which can be taught on a rote level basis like you learned in school. So yeah. And a lot of design schools, for example, even in a lot of IITs and NITs, it is very open in terms of what you interpret design is essentially. And that's what those 4 years are if you choose to go for a degree, essentially. So yeah. Yeah, so I won't bother with this. I won't bother with this with you folks again. I'll just take you with the other example of the case study which I have, which was on the Nutanix one. Just give me a second, okay? I'll just share that. So we'll check out the problem statement as well. Just give me a second. Window. Yeah. So we'll check out the design task which was shared by Nutanix. You'll see that this is the only problem. This is the only page of the problem statement that they're shared. All of the other pages were related to their other verbatim and NDA and such. So I hope you folks won't be recording this and leaking out everywhere. So I may or may not get into trouble. So the problem statement which they had given was quite simple. So Clark is a manager in Smallville. which is a smart village now, thanks to LexCorp. They went with like a DC theme problem statement. So Clark is obviously Superman here. And so essentially, it's a smart village which has all of these pre-existing amenities which are present for folks. And then he is currently responsible for assessing 2 farms. And then they had given kinds of processes which he has to go through in order to grow his products. So we had to design a dashboard which would help him manage and oversee such factors which affect his land and yield. So, and then we have to identify, and then here they had given the nudges of what kind of information they want to show. And then they have given the bottom line of what your product is supposed to solve for. So over here, you'll see that the outcome of your problem has already been provided and the background information has also been provided. So though the prompt is really small, it does provide you with the important aspects of the problem statement which you need. And a good thing about loosely set problem statements is that you can choose things from your end. So I'll just wait for a minute so that you folks can go through this from your own. And once you're done, just drop a thumbs up and then we'll move on to the solution. Okay. Right. So have you folks went through the problem statement? Okay. So I'm hoping that Deepak is going at the average speed of the reading, folks, so that everybody else has read through it as well. So yeah, what we'll do is after that I'll share the solution. Then just give me a second. So I'll switch my tab now. Yeah. So hey folks, this was the solution which this was the final solution which was for the Nedani's design task. So over here in this kind of a problem statement, since they had given quite a small prompt, I decided to not break down the problem statement further because everything which they had set up was quite less. And then we had to show a lot of our thinking in a divergent manner because they have given quite less information, right? So I first set out with an initial set of assumptions, and this is something which you should set up. So in problem statements like this, where you get quite less info, right? You should set up the initial assumption then and there itself, because again they hadn't given much information. So you are supposed to like at least make sure that you and them are on a common set of values, so that it may or may not happen that they come up with a different kind of an fact or a assumption which will essentially hamper your case study as such, right? Now the problem statement which was given, so I had to essentially do a backwards reading into what the agricultural model is. And since there isn't much articles like you'll find in a consumer space, you'll mostly find research papers which are written in the agri-tech domain, basically. So what I learned was that so I based it all around India only, because India is like we're primarily like an agricultural country. If you see what India 2 and 3 is doing, so yeah. The way those folks works is the work is through a crop calendar. So I understand. So I essentially read through what a crop calendar is, and then I visualized what a crop calendar, how a crop calendar works like. I segmented it into 3 specific aspects of it, and then I coalesced them into like the kinds of questions the kinds of questions which Clark would be asking at those different aspects, essentially. Now this becomes a really good starting point. So because here you're estimating how your system would work as a whole rather than diving down directly into the designs and the user flows, because you'll see that in the problem statement they had given like some very direct processes, right? So starting off directly with like, hey, so Clark is supposed to mow down his field or like harvest it, so we'll just make a couple of screens for that. That isn't something which you should do directly. You should do your own research and then show how it is connected. And in this case you'll find that I didn't even make all 4 of the user flows with that given. So I just worked on one actually. And after this, I expanded on the crop calendar on a financial basis, essentially, because they had given the bottom line of the farm itself, right? At the end of it, the farm has to be sustainable. So he's supposed to at least break even or create a profit. So we put up the entire crop calendar, matched it then and there itself. And after that, what we had done was find out the kinds of resources which is getting cancelled out. So his final payday is quite it's quite far ahead, right? And then we plotted down like an average timeline for it, so that we can find out what is the key, uh, what is the most important user flow which we can target, what is the most critical stage which we can look for. This is something which I wanted to get through my reading through the research paper itself, but through research papers itself. But the issue was that I wasn't able to get like a direct answer from none of those research papers. So I had to think of it from my end. So this is the way I did. So I scoped it down a bit further. I checked it out financially. And then what I saw is that these three activities, essentially the phase of growing the crops itself, after plantation and then before harvesting, that is one of the longest periods. And on top of that, you have a lot of periodic activities or like quasi-periodic activities which go on. So this is something where the user will be interacting with our product a lot more, if you think about it, because this is a one-time activity. This is a one-time activity. This is a payoff which he doesn't do through our product, which may be a future capability in the future. So this is something in which the user will be interacting with our product a lot. So this became like a good section for me to focus on, both financially and through in terms of interaction as well. So yeah, then I specifically focused on this section, that what are the kinds of things they do. So I checked out a lot of videos from the government of India itself. So MHRD, a lot of research papers and a lot of blogs as well, which some activists had written. So it highlights the day-to-day activities which farmers do. So the thing is that in a non-automated world of farming, folks actually scout out the field by themselves. And this was a founding which I got. And then what you see is that the kind of pathing which they take is randomized on a day-to-day basis. And that leaves a lot of uncovered space, which they aren't able to check out. So for example, if there is like a waterlogging in this area, so these crops will be affected in this area, in the yellow part, and you aren't able to check it out. The theory is that you can, if given random enough, so you'll be able to cover the field on a weekly basis, but you can't cover it on a day-by-day basis, because since the walk is that long, you won't be able to. So by the time it's quite hot in the afternoon, your half of your day has already ended, and you haven't even covered half of it. So again, I want to highlight the way this has been structured, where I have made a visualization of my key problem with this. So if a recruiter is going through this really quickly, they can at least look at this and this. So they can look at the dialogue, or they can look at the title, and they can look at the visualization behind it, and the rationale behind those scenario are written then and there itself. So what ends up happening is that, again, if they're looking through it really quickly, they'll at least remember some of it. Yeah. And again, all of the key points which I had made beforehand related to how you can see, how you can chain these sections through questions, rather than like essentially like to like a loosely set design process rather than making like a hard set design process. After this is me scoping through the problem statement, where we had to resolve the guesswork. And this is where a domain known as precision farming comes into. It's a preset research area which has been active since the 1980s and such. And this is where all of the folks are essentially have been working through to automate this entire design, automate this entire farming experience. Over there, I had to go through a lot of technical aspects of what these things are. So what I ended up doing was, again, visualize the information in front of you, again, so that they can read through it whenever they want, and then all of this information will be present then and there itself. Now, this is an externalism. So this is an extra assumption which I had made from my end, which was related to how Lexcorp's drones will be standardized, they will be automated, and then if something happens, then Smallville will have like a service center for it. Now, this is a very random and an anecdotal assumption which I've made, but what this does is it helps me solidify the idea, because the folks there hadn't given much background to the problem statement, right? And that is something which you can do from your end. So yeah, just yeah. And after this, what we did was, once understanding that how we'll get the information, we have to see what kinds of action people can take through these information, right? Once you have this sensors and this kind of an imaging setup, so this is like a satellite-based imaging which you can do through satellites or drones, basically, and it helps you understand where there is vegetation, where there is water logging, essentially. So once you have this kind of information, what kinds of actions you can take, right? That would be the next question which you'll have. And all of this is based on the first set of questions which I had essentially put up here. Yeah. So moving a bit down. So essentially we had to think about how the data will be aggregated, and then we can set up some threshold-based actions. Hey, if the NDVI goes below this much, so we have to ping the user, for example. So this is all the things I done. This was one feature which I had to essentially think of from my end, which was, given this kinds of system inputs, how can we essentially make the resources used optimized, essentially. So for example, that the user selects like this patch of land, and then they want to like essentially sample it themselves. What they can do is they can essentially take these three information. This was written in the problem statement. These two is something which we researched from our end. We can put it up in our system, and then it will come up with an application strategy. So for example, if you're irrigating through a drone, and if a lot of parts of your field are waterlogged, so you won't need to put up as much water there, right? So it can make an application strategy at a very granular level, like on a like on a 1 meter square or like in a 10 meter square level. So rather than the farmer like making all of those calculation in his head, you can make all of those calculations then and there itself, and then apply for all of your day-to-day activities, which I had covered upwards. So this was like one of the key feature which will help you optimize it. Now, after this, again, I decided to show the solution first, set up its capabilities then and there, so they have some understanding of what the product does, and then show the scenario. Now, this is a scenario which I had, so like this, so like this became like a scenario where the problem comes up. So since Clark is Superman, so he'll go off to them, and then he gets a ping from our product that, hey, there is a so there's a solution, so there's like a problem there. So so while making those UI screens, I had to come up with a scenario, and then while putting those UI screens to showcase my solution, again, rather than a feature-centric view, what I did was I came up with like this scenario. And then the scenario was quite simple, that this area is waterlogged. So the solution shows him a ping, he clicks on it, and then it opens up a side panel view. There it shows you the directions so that you will be able to check it out yourself in the farm if he wants to do that, or he can send out a drone if he wants. It's up to him. Once he sees that the actual system isn't damaged and there's some water logging, and a lot of this water logging might happen from a runoff from the beside field. So like the farmer beside you, like he put up too much water for irrigation because he doesn't use our product, right? So he essentially had a lot of runoff. So you have like drying agents for it. I looked it up just for this user flow. So what he can do is he can go to automations, set up a new automation, and then he can set up the time, whether it's a periodic activity or a one-time activity. So in this case, we had like a disaster or an anomaly, right? So solving this anomaly becomes a one-by-one basis. And if you think about it, this is also something which we can make automated. Hey, if this becomes this much, then you should go and check it out yourself. But given the time period of, again, I had about 1.5 days for this actually. So we had even less time to work on this. So I didn't automate that flow. I just made it like a bit manual, which made like a good user story as well, to be fair. So over there, he would essentially add the detail, what kind of a work it is, what kind of automation it is, what kind of a time it is, and then against what property the variable application rate or the VAR is supposed to be generated. And this is where the VAR will be generated. Now, showing that feature above helps you bring visibility to your design. Since you're a designer, it doesn't mean that you are only supposed to think of the screens. You're supposed to think of the technical feasibility behind it. I'm not asking you to code down the actual backend logic behind it. I'm asking you to, at least at a higher level, think of a way in which it could be implemented. Now, there will be a lot of technical feasibilities, but showcasing this kind of depth in your thought is really helpful. So, yeah. And after that, your VAR will be generated, and then your drone will be dispatched. Now, showcasing an actual screen for it isn't that helpful. What you can do is go through a lot of stock footage websites and then showcase your flow then and there. And then with this, he's able to work out. And then you can see that at the starting of the day, all of this section is purple. So this is like a standard visualization color. I haven't like augmented it from my end. The research papers use this only. So this was something which I hadn't mentioned, and those folks had asked me during the interview, hey, why did you choose colors like this? So, and after that, at the end of the day, it looked like this, which you can check out from the My Field Help, my Field Help tab. Now you'll see that I did not make an information architecture for this entire section. I did not make a user flow behind it. My scenario walkthrough gives you a flow through the entire problem statement itself, right? And lastly, this is something which will be different if you're trying to essentially interview for enterprise companies. Enterprise companies and service companies are two separate things. Enterprise companies can be product oriented as well. And the vice versa is also true. So a lot of consumer facing companies can be service based companies as well. So yeah. Over here, this is a service blueprint for the kind of a solution I'll have. So over here, the middle section shows what your system is supposed to do. So if you have a centralized server which runs all of these calculations or like puts it up for your final UI, renders all of it for your UI. And then we'll have to essentially think what the touch point for the user is and what the touch point for your stakeholder is or the object is within your services. And so this is actually quite technical, but showcasing this gives crystal clear, not crystal clear per se, but like at least some sense of visibility and clarity for what your work does. And this isn't something which you can put only in the design tasks only. This is something which you can put up in your case studies as well. So that once you show the feature at a higher level, then you can start to dig down on it and then show service blueprint related to it, essentially. This was one more feature which I decided to showcase. And since it would be yet another automation, so like the flow would be quite similar. So rather than making the individual steps for it, I just showed that, hey, once the crops have grown up, this is something which we can do. So yeah. And lastly, again, the further steps which I could have done given more time and the process audit which I could have done. And lastly, thank you for your time. And then the references or like the document. So yeah, when it comes to enterprise study, so the one difference is just that you are supposed to think on a service, so like service design essentially. So you're supposed to think through that lens to some extent, so that you can essentially come up with a better understanding of how the entire system is supposed to work, basically. So yeah, you'll see that this is so you'll see that I didn't touch upon storytelling as such, and but the reason is that that was the conclusion, that was the concludatory, or like the conclusion of this entire talk itself, which is that once I took you through all of the sections, you'll see that I didn't mention like a process centric view of it rather than what I did, which will feel again more engaging and a more and at a more personal level. And that is what storytelling is about essentially. So setting up your case study, setting up your design tasks in a manner which is digestible for first-time viewers. So that is what storytelling is about. And I gave you examples of it rather than coming up. Rather than coming up a pitch deck to showcase all of this to you, because again, I don't want to indoctrinate my own thinking to you folks, rather than give you the opportunity to learn it yourself. And that is where like I'll just help you to tune your taste a bit, but you will be doing most of the heavy lifting so that you can make those decisions when I'm not there, basically. So yeah, that is what is my thinking as a whole when it comes to learning design and teaching design. So yeah, that's about it from my end. So do you folks have any questions from your end? If you have, then like just raise your hand and then we can just like go ahead with it. And if you don't, so yeah, well and good. Any queries, any questions related to like case study or like implementing this in your case study? Anything regarding that? If not that, then that's fine as well. And also, if you are a bit shy while asking it in like an online meet with like a bunch of strangers, what you can do is again book up a trial session, and then you'll be able to like we'll be able to like go through those questions then and there itself. So yeah, anything from your end, folks? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's all right. Hey, so Utkarsh, shall we wrap up? Hey, so Utkarsh, so shall
Yes,
we wrap up this? Yeah.
yes, we
Cool.
can wrap up this.
Okay. Cool. Wait, hold on. I think so. Deepak had one more question. So yeah, is it safe to have an optional case study with detailed process, probably when recruiters reach out? Yeah, so that's the thing. You have to put both your detailed research findings of your study as well as the larger level goal. So for example, like the context screens which I had shown, so like for in like in Ved's case study, I had shown you how he essentially showed the entire user story, right? So we put up like the user banner and then like a text bubble in which he shared how his day would go like, and then we deep dived on it on a storyboard essentially. Or in this case, in the no broker one, where we essentially showed one section where we had the user archetype set up, and then we showed the table across it. So it isn't that you have to make like a smaller case study and then make like a detailed case study. It isn't that all of the studies have to be detailed. The way you structure it is the difference between making it like a lethargic literature piece and then making it more engaging. So you have to put up like a larger level understanding of what your research did up top, and then put it and then just below that you're immediately supposed to put up your finding. Oh wait, so what I'll do is I have like a really good example in which that has been implemented from somebody I know. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. So I have like a so have you folks used Zomato? Well, I'm pretty sure you folks have used Zomato. I don't think you folks haven't used Zomato. Maybe Swiggy as well. So I know the designer who worked on Zomato Awards, and he has made like a case study on it. So he worked on it while he was an intern, and he got a return offer on it. So he has made like a really engaging case study about it, and it applies what I have been talking about in this entire study really well, where he does like a larger level text to showcase what the entire section is about, or like a larger level insight, and then immediately gets down on the nitty gritty of it. Yeah. So just give me a second. I'll share my screen regarding that. Just a second. Okay, Jha, I think so. I'm just searching and then getting up his portfolio. Yeah, give me a second. Meanwhile, we do have one more question, I think, which is which platform is the best for like portfolio Behance, Notion, portfolio website. So I have my own dedicated website for Ved, since he doesn't have a development background. Well, he's from engineering, but he doesn't have a development background. So there I asked him to make up Behance, and I do have one more mentee who actually went through with Notion. So I have seen people work on all three, and to be honest, it's completely up to you. The thing is that yeah, exactly. So you're aware that each platform has their own benefits. So the thing is that if you're trying to create a more personal experience, I would say go with Notion. Don't try to invest completely on a personal website, because what would end up happening is that if you're a fresher, then you'll be too focused on the technicality behind those websites and then implementing those interactions that you have thought of, and then you may get you may get a result which isn't all the way through what you're thinking. So a website becomes too cumbersome to handle. Meanwhile, Behance becomes too templatized. So Notion becomes like a really good, good, good meeting point. So yeah, what is the best way to find a good mentor? I mean, like first of all, like you folks are already at pre-place. So what does you need? But yeah, on a serious note, what you can do is you need, like, whenever you're trying to find a mentor. So I do have a mentor. Like he's currently like a L6 at Google. He has been guiding me for about 2 to 3 years now, I believe. So the thing is that the kinds of mentors you need are which are first of all approachable. So it's okay to say the wrong things in front of them, where they help you out. And other than that, you need a kind of a mentor which sets you up to explore things yourself, rather than giving you like just one way it will work. So even then, so like rather than like providing you with like just do this one exact thing and this is the only way things can be done, they'll help you to essentially set up a framework yourself. And that is what I was talking about, and that is something which I have so that became something which I also then started to move forward with, where you have to become self-sufficient, where you should so whenever you are with that mentor, you understand that one day you'll be able to outgrow them or outpace them with the help of their own mentorship. So they'll be able to make you self sufficient, and that is something which is really important. So in the early days, he was my design mentor per se, where he actually helped me with like the nitty gritty of the design, like helping me out with like a few interviews and like matlab, going them through, like helping me with the mock interviews and the portfolio and all. After that, he became more of more of a friend and a consultant as such, if that makes sense. Where so when I joined the company, so I'll ask about how a promotion cycle is generally set up, what are the ways in which you can talk to your manager, and also that is now so that is something in which he helps with me now. So we have a chat about fortnightly, where I'll just call him up and ask like how are things going and all. So yeah, uh, that's one way. How to approach redesign tasks? It is a challenge. It is changing the layouts of vision. No, so the layout becomes really important in the way in which you make it, but in your head, never make a distinction between visual changes to layout and changes to the actual content and structure. So what I mean to say is that key, never separate visual and the text which you're writing. Those are just something which go hand in hand. So basically, what I mean is that I have opened up the Zomato about section. What I'll do is just after this, I'll go a bit deeper onto your question. Okay. Since that is a question which we forgot about. So just give me a second. Hey, so this is the Zomato about study which Ankita had worked on. Let me just zoom on it a bit. Yeah. So this is Zomato awards. This case study may be boring. Oh no, don't scroll down. Go and vote first. Yeah. Okay, so before we start, so he has put up like the larger question above it, and then he has put up like a smaller section where he goes on to the nitty-gritty of it essentially. And the best part is this, but why Zomato bots? We already have done. Okay, okay, come on. Yeah, so this section is actually quite good where he goes that why do we need Zomato awards in the first place? He highlights the problem statement here, and then the solution is here itself. So the reason they went ahead with Zomato awards was because a lot of folks weren't using the dining option even while it existed in the platform for a long while, and the issue is that folks are using Google because of its better crowd rating method essentially. So they wanted to kickstart that. And then if you want to have good user adoption at first, you'll have to essentially create an event around it, which was to drive up engagements. So the TLDR version of is just this, that they don't want to, Google folks, they don't want to put up an external platform in that user journey, in that user flow essentially. So that is what Zomato was is for. But this section, if you're a recruiter who's scrolling past it like this, you'll have to read through this, and then you'll have to go through this. So even if you skip this, you have went through this and this, and that makes it really good, because during the interview you can go through this section while talking about it. So this is this is one place where I have seen this kind of a thinking, this kind of top down explanation of what things are in application in a completely different manner, which helped me to again revitalize my own tastes as well. So this was a good reference study which I looked at like when it was launched. This was launched quite recently as far as I remember. So yeah, then he goes into the entire design process. I'll drop in this study as well if you folks want to have a look at. So yeah, this also becomes like quite a good way to showcase. So the framework or like the thinking which I'm talking about is the exact same one, but the method in which it has been implemented is completely different. And that is something which I've been talking about, that the way you'll implement is quite different. So the way Ved implemented it is quite different. The way I implemented it in my study is quite different. The way he implemented it is quite different, down to like the actual layout and the actual way in which that design has been made. You'll see that. But the actual narrative with which that information is coming out of the case study is the exact same one. So the outcome is the same, but the way it has been implemented is different. So yeah, that is a kind of freedom you should have when you're trying to make these studies, basically. And that is what that is what I'll instill in you folks if you folks ever try to join in. So yeah. Yeah. So this is also like a really good study, like a really small one, but like a really good one. That's it. So yeah. I think this sort of answers that question as well, where you're talking about how to approach redesigning tasks. That is the way you do. So you'll have to take up folks who haven't went through your case studies, get a critique on it. You'll see that whenever folks start asking a lot of questions around a section, that means that they haven't digested it properly, be it through a time constraint or not even reading through properly. So whenever you send out a case study and you feel like, hey, folks aren't reading through it properly, and that's why it's not able to gain that much visibility, that isn't the user's fault. That's yours. You're supposed to make it digestible. That's the core point behind it. So you're essentially supposed to set it up by checking out the kinds of questions people are asking you, find a way to integrate it into your portfolio, and then set it up in the manner I told you. That first show a high level insight up top as your opening statement, then showcase the background research or the background insights which coalesced into that one. And after that, you can show the output of it. So you have to make that kind of a mini group, and then you can implement it whichever kind of a visual layout you want to. So that is completely up to you, but the structure has to be set up that way. So Yeah. So while auditing, that's the thing. Don't audit yourself. You're supposed to ask it to first-time viewers because that is what your target is, right? So this is so yeah. So the entire session was about the design of portfolio itself, not about designing or like design skill, but about designing portfolio itself. So yeah, you'll have to go through and talk with people, those who haven't seen your case study first, and then you have to capture the kinds of questions they're asking. Because if they're asking a lot of questions in a specific section, you'll understand that that section isn't digestible. Or it may happen that a lot of folks will ask that, hey, the research is fine, but wait, how did you land up on this solution? If they ask you this, then that means that your research and the final solution are disconnected. They'll have to check out your ideation section to understand that, hey, are the features actually coalescing through your study or not? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Anything else? Again, feel free to book up a session, ask as many questions as you want regarding to the session as well, even if you don't go through an LTM. So that like matlab, the thing is that key like conversion, like monetary conversions isn't like matlab, the direct aim of it. Like this is something which I have been doing. So I wanted to share it with a larger audience if that's helpful to anybody here. So yeah. Anything else? Hey, so you have to put up a question as well, man. Yeah. Hey, Utkarsh, is it kind of like the meeting spilling over a bit? Or how do you folks go about it? Like,
So like if people have a multiple questions, we can have a trial session with you
yeah, exactly,
with them,
exactly.
and like
So,
you can discuss in details with
hmm,
each and every candidate so that they can get a specific time and how you can
yeah,
help them
exactly.
regarding whole journey. That would be the
So,
best. So
yeah. So, how about we close out the meeting in about 5 minutes? So, if you folks have any questions, then put it up. We'll just wait for like 5 more minutes, and then we can drop off the call. Is that all right?
yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Cool. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Hey, thank you folks for joining over. So yeah, design is like a niche space. So look, I do understand like the like turnout and all like regarding these things. So the thing is that the information I hope which I have given you, like I hope that it didn't become too abstract. You do have like some tangible actions which you can take. How can I show my current company works to the recruiter? So the way you do that is, so look, you do have an NDA, but you can implement an honor system as well. So for that, what I can do is I can share my screen. So yeah, so this was my portfolio where I had some of my work which I had done for Flipkart and then for Toshiba as well. And both of these are NDA studies. So first of all, I made a website which has both Google crawler turned off. You can explicitly set that up, or you can set up a password to put it up on a portfolio, or you can set up those passwords for specific case studies only. So what you can do is that if you are making a website, then you have that flexibility with you. If you're making to Notion, then there are a lot of plugins to put up that password. If you have Behance through which you're showing your portfolio, then what you can do is that show the initial set of scope and research of what your company or what the work you have done, and then close it off with a tab sharing the NBA itself, the NDA itself. So I'll show you an example of Behance itself. Can you share that link? Are you talking about my portfolio or yeah? Okay. So my portfolio is this one. If you search up arinrathod.com portfolio or like Arin Rathod portfolio, you won't be able to get this off Google. So matlab, I turned off the crawler so that it won't be indexed onto any kind of search results. And you can do that by going through Google's website, and then they'll give you like a snippet of code which you can put up in a website that, hey, don't parse my website, you don't crawl through my website to index it basically. And you have like a generalized one as well, which will turn it off for every search engine, and then you have one which is specific to Google only. So you can put up both. I put up both in my case. So yeah, my recruiters haven't been able to find this basically, and make sure that you don't put it up on a public platform, like God forbid, don't put it up on Behance or something. Don't put it up on your LinkedIn or something. So yeah. Now what I'll do is I'll show you like an example of a guy who worked at Oracle, and he essentially uh, didn't go through like he wasn't able to show all of his information directly then and there, right? So he essentially made like a NDA-esque study where you make an entry point of view or like a funnel through which you can essentially bring people over. So yeah, let me just share my screen and go through that. Just give me a second. Yeah, let me start sharing this tab instead. Yeah. Okay. So this is Viral, and he had interned at Oracle. Okay. So the thing is that while showcasing his work, what he did was he showcased the background and the team in which he worked, what his role was, a generalized timeline of what he did, the brief of the solution, the background context behind it. But since you'll see that I'm already halfway through the case study, you'll understand that there isn't a solution which is coming over. And that's this section, NDA. See, over here, he has written that he has an NDA and he won't be able to show. So what you can do is make your Behance case study in your Figma file itself, make an NDA section, blur it all out, place your NDA section here and like then and there itself that you can contact me. And after that, you can close off your case study so that you have at least made a funnel to show your work, right? So that you'll be able to put up that information and you don't have to worry about showcasing the actual solution. Since if you're already working with a company and you showcase your work, that actually becomes much more tangible to judge for them, because self-made case studies, the issues that keep the way in which most designers make the problem statements is that they'll make the problem statement and then they'll pigeonhole they essentially set up the problem statement such that the sets of assumptions and the cases which they have taken pigeonholes just a singular solution. Essentially, they'll think of a solution first and then try to frame a problem statement around it. And that is something which is very easy to catch on to. And if you folks have ever done that in your any portfolio pieces, then I'm just letting you know that it's very easy to catch on to, basically. So real work becomes a really good plus point to show up in your case study or like a real type project. I don't want to like demotivate you folks into thinking that those kinds of problems like self problem statements are bad. It's just that they have to be set up properly. And if they are, then the recruiter will again understand that as well. So if you're showcasing through Behance, this is one way you can do it. If you're showcasing through Notion, then you could just install a plugin and put it up as a password protected link. If you're making a website, then you have complete creative freedom. Lastly, if you don't have any way in which you can show that work, or in the case where you can't show to where you can't even put it up on your Behance portfolio like then and there itself, what you can do is put up a drive link, put up like a view only drive link on your resume essentially, and then share it out and then notify them that you have a portfolio with the public work here and your current company work will be accessible through your resume, since you'll be sending out both your portfolio and resume, right? So you can attach your work by setting up either as a Behance vertical section or like or like a Google slide doc with all of the work which you have shown. Again, uh, an NDA is for protecting the company's IP, but you can showcase the kind of work you have done while side skirting it without compromising what they have done as well, by showcasing your contributions to the entire project itself without essentially leaking any kind of key information. So for example, you can go through the study and then showcase like what kind of input you had provided and how these solutions look like. And another way to make sure that it isn't violating like something really big is that if the product has already been launched, then you can show those screens and the previous iterations behind it. So if the product if the product or the feature has already been launched, then you'll be able to side skirt it. So in my case, I'm not even allowed to like essentially talk about like the department and all. But the thing is, you can side skirt it to some extent. And he has made it up in this section in my portfolio. I'll just share this tab. So I always write this, that I have unlocked the study under closed group viewing. Closed group viewing is a way to side skirt NDA. Closed group viewing is for design recruitment only. So you can always write this and then put it up. You have to write that you honor NDA policies as well, because showcasing works with NDA like completely is a red flag for a recruiter as well. So this is a gray area. So this sentence is perfectly to cover you from both ends, essentially. So I honor NDA policies, and I would like you to do the same. This is already enough for the recruiter to understand that this work isn't something which he should share out directly with his coworkers and such. Again, nothing is stopping him, but this is the honor system. And if they are sending it out directly as such, then that isn't the kind of company where you should go and work together. You get my point? So this covers you from both ends, basically. So I have written it for both this one as well as the Toshiba one. So I hope that answered your question regarding NDA. So yeah, NDA is much more convoluted. So like, we'll have to check on a company or company basis. So yeah, but given the time and we are already like overdue by half an hour, so yeah, this is all of the things which you can cover up. Yeah. Any more questions, folks? Again, we are quite late into our session, so I would again recommend to book up trial session so that you can ask those questions. Even if you don't want to get converted into an LTM, you just want to you just have some queries with this, just book up a session and then come out. Like I'll be able to answer them much more freely and then cater to your specific needs as well, and you will be able to converse as well. So yeah, anything else, or we'll close it out. So yeah. All right. So okay, shall we like close it up then?
Yes, we can just close.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. I think like you folks have put up a lot of time and a lot of energy to come over during the weekend by not going to watch any movies and then like sit through the session. So yeah, good job on that. Good commitment for your personal development. So yeah, all the best, folks. I'll go now. Okay. Yeah. So bye, everybody. Bye.